This server build is absurd. It's absurd for anyone's home lab, including my own, but it's also exciting because it's my first 4-node 2U server built from the chassis up, and I'm bringing you along for the ride. Let's get to it. This video is brought to you by NetData. NetData is revolutionizing the way organizations monitor and troubleshoot their IT infrastructure. Delivering real-time, high-fidelity monitoring solutions, NetData provides unparalleled visibility into your systems and applications. Their flagship software, NetData Cloud, offers comprehensive monitoring, insightful analytics, and powerful alerting capabilities, all accessible through an intuitive, user-friendly interface. Whether you're managing a small business or a large enterprise, NetData's cutting-edge technology empowers you to detect anomalies, optimize performance, and ensure the reliability of your infrastructure with unparalleled ease and precision. We use NetData here to monitor our most critical systems, like our TrueNAS scale host we lovingly call SuperSAN that stores all of our data. NetData helps us troubleshoot where or what is causing bottlenecks, whether it's CPU usage, networking, ZFS issues, and more. The dashboards are beautiful, easy to digest, and deployment is incredibly simple. You can run NetData for free under their community license that works well for people with just a few servers, but for those home labbers with greater needs, NetData also offers a special home lab plan that offers unrestricted access to NetData's premium features at an affordable price. It includes unlimited usage of nodes and custom dashboards, alert integrations, and a mobile app while adhering to a fair use policy. If you're not using NetData, you should. Check the link in the description below for more details, and now back to the video. Hey there, home labbers, self-hosters, IT pros, and engineers. Rich here. This build is probably not for you. Frankly, I don't know if any rational home labber would be crazy enough to even consider building out something like this, but it's also exciting for me for a few reasons. One, this host is my first gen scalable CPU, and it's also my first 4-node host, dwarfing my little 2-node E5 2680V4 cluster downstairs. It's also the most expensive server that I have built in my entire life. Thank you, Oregon Kicker. I'm planning to use this to test and evaluate virtualization clustering for XCP&G, Proxmox, and even Nutanix, and you'll see more of those videos coming out in the future, so stay tuned. But first, we need to build this host that will be my platform for testing. Let's talk about the hardware. The chassis of choice for this build came from eBay as a CTO or configure-to-order build without CPU, RAM, or storage. The grand total was $1,999 with free shipping straight to my door. This bad boy right here is a Supermicro 2029 BT-HNC04 24-bay 4-node chassis loaded with 4 X11 DPT-B dual-socket mainboards that support both Gen-1 and Gen-2 Intel Scalable Xeon CPUs. That's right, friends, this single chassis is capable of housing a grand total of 8 Intel Xeon CPUs, all in a single 2U form factor. Starting at the front of the unit, the 24 bays of 2.5-inch discs are broken up into 4 sets of 6 discs, one for each node housed within. These bays support both SAS and SATA discs, backed by a Broadcom 3008 controller configured in IT mode. Around the back of the unit, we can clearly see all 4 nodes, 2 stacked on each side, roughly 1 U in height, split in the middle by the PSUs. Speaking of power delivery, the chassis is powered by dual 2200-watt PSUs that are literally the longest PSUs I've ever seen on a server. Seriously, just look at these things. They're nearly the length of the entire chassis. With the externals out of the way, let's talk about the main board features. The compute nodes slide out of the back of the unit, and each is hot swappable, so any of the nodes can be removed without having to power down the entire chassis. Let's take a look at the X11 DPT-B boards in detail. Each board supports dual Intel Xeon Scalable Cascade Lake or Skylake CPUs on an LGA 3647 socket via the Intel C621 chipset. The board supports up to 6 TB of DDR4 ECC memory across the 24 total DIMM slots on each node, just an absurd amount of RAM. Outside of the CPU and RAM capabilities, this board also supports dual NVMe SSDs via a riser for boot storage, and for networking, each node came equipped with a dual 25GB Super I/O module, providing all the SFP28 goodness I would ever need for this host. The Intel C621 chipset buys me a lot of life in the server. Right now, the Gen-1 Scalable Xeons are dirt cheap, so it's finally easy to get into this platform. The plus here is that the chipset also supports Gen-2 Xeons, so in a year or two from now, when those Gen-2 chips start falling in price, I'll be able to upgrade without having to buy an entire new set of hardware. I'm also blown away by the sheer amount of RAM each node can support. 16 terabytes of RAM, people. Holy shit. And that's, not something I'll ever put in any of these nodes, but it's just damn impressive though. Top that off with the dual internal M.2 NVMe support means I won't have to use any of the 6 2.5 bays up front for an OS install or caching. And let's not forget the two 25 gig SFP Plus connections, which means I'll have plenty of throughput capacity for these nodes for VM migrations and HCI. But speaking of CPUs though, let's talk about what I'm installing in the 4 nodes. After a ton of research into which Xeon CPU to settle on, weighing cost against performance, clock speed against core count, I landed on the Intel Xeon Gold 6132 CPU. These chips, at least at the time of my build, are the middle ground or break-even point between price and performance for the Gen-1 Scalables. The Intel Xeon Gold 6132 CPUs are 14-core, 28-thread CPUs with a base clock of 2.6 GHz and a boost clock to 3.7 GHz, have a little over 19 MB of level 3 cache, and a modest 140-watt TDP. I walked away with 8 of them for $27 a piece for a grand total of $216 out the door from eBay. The amount of research I went through to figure out which Xeon to go with took longer than I expected. The Scalable Xeon family is frustratingly massive, with different tiers of performance like bronze, silver, gold, and even platinum, and then within each tier, different prices, core counts, clock speeds, and features. Needless to say, after rummaging through eBay, comparing prices and CPUs against each other, the Gold 6132 chips ended up on the top and will serve my 4-node well. Seriously, what does any HomeLabber need with 112 cores in one box? Next up was RAM. Having 4 nodes to populate meant I wasn't going to get away with this without spending a considerable amount of cash on memory. Thankfully, after some searching around on eBay, I came across this listing for 16 32GB modules of DDR4 2133P ECC memory. The eBay listing showed it for $504, but I reached out to the seller and negotiated a deal to get the entire lot for $490, which was fantastic. I think I mentioned this every server build I've done here on the channel, but I'm gonna say it again. Many listings have a make an offer button that allows you to offer a lower price. Take advantage of this. Don't be a jerk and offer $50 below asking price. Be reasonable, but I think you'll find that most of them, especially in the server hardware space, are willing to make a deal. And secondly, if you find a seller that you like, favorite that seller and do more business with them when you can. Reward good sellers with your dollar and don't give money to the ones who aren't. Anyway, 16 32GB modules comes out to a grand total of 512 GB of total memory for the host and 128 GB of RAM per node. That's the same amount of RAM I'm running per node in my existing cluster, so I'm comfortable staying at that per node amount. Moving on. In the storage department, I was able to call in a favor with a friend who recently came upon a surplus of Intel DC S3500 480GB SSDs. I worked out a deal with him for all 24 drives up front for a grand total of $500 out the door. Storage Review did a great deep dive into these SSDs when they came on the market, but the TLDR is that their SATA interfaces have a read speed up to 500 megabytes a second and a write speed up to 410 megabytes a second. Plenty for what I need. You can find these same drives for roughly $30 to $45 a disc, with the upper end being new in box if you're looking for the equivalent of what I'm using on eBay. And for the internal NVMe SSDs for each node, I went with 500GB Western Digital Blue SN570 NVMe SSDs. These drives are about as cheap as you can get them at $48 each, and since each node can support up to 2 of them, I ordered 8 for a grand total of $384. So let's talk about the final cost of everything. Here's hoping my wife doesn't watch this video. Starting with the chassis. The 4-node host came to a total of $1,999. The 8 Xeon Gold 6132 CPUs came out to a total of $216. The 512GB of DDR4 ECC RAM came out to a total of $490. The 24 480GB Intel SSDs came out to an even $500, and the 8 500GB NVMe's came out to a total of $384. I'm also going to count the 8 Twin-X DACs I bought in this cost because to not include them would be dishonest. The 8 10GB DACs came out to a total of $152. All of this comes out to the grand total of $3,741, which incidentally is $259 under my $4,000 budget. Now, let's get to building this monster. We need to install all 8 chips, RAM, NVMe's, and SSDs into this host, power it on, make sure it works, get it racked and cabled into the network, and for the sake of redundancy, we're only going to show you building out one of the nodes since it's kind of rinse and repeat, if you get what I mean. Anyway, let's get to it. noticed the first problem now that I have this server down here to go in the rack behind me. They gave me rails for this thing, but the rails don't mount to the server. So look here, you can see there's holes, right? And those are where the rails are supposed to connect to. But these rails, they need little clips that they don't have. So good thing I've got these guys here. These are just L brackets, angle brackets that fit a cabinet. Let's get those installed. Each node has two 25 gig connections on it, but my USW Pro switch has 4 25 gig connections, and they're actually all being used by existing hardware below here. So my plan for this server for right now is to run 8 10 gig DACs to the USW Pro switch, and my intention here is to use one of those connections just for VM traffic, right? Talking to the VMs and using them. And the other 10 gig connection is just dedicated to data replication and moving workloads between those nodes in this new cluster I'm gonna build. Things like Ceph and other HCI platforms really need good high-speed data throughput to make it actually usable. And I wanna make sure that I give it as much as I can so I can really test these out, make sure that they work really well, and it's not the fact that I have poor data connections between them. So I'm gonna get to that now. Online, baby. Online! It's alive! This is the out-of-band management or OOB interface for one of the nodes. Sometimes you hear them called ILOs or iDRACs depending on who manufactured your server, but they all basically do the same thing, provide remote access to your host. I've already powered this node on, so let's see what the OOB interface says about this freshly built node. In the remote console preview, it's pretty clear that the host is booted, and from the image I can see that it couldn't find an OS to boot off of, which is great because I haven't installed anything yet, and it's not stuck on some error. Over on the left is the FRU reading and hardware information tabs. Let's check them out. The FRU reading tab shows us what the hardware reported in terms of the make and model of the chassis and motherboard and its asset tag. This tells me the hardware is talking to the BMC, which is good. Let's hop over to the hardware information tab and see if all of our installed hardware is working. And we're looking good. Expanding the CPU section shows me that both sockets are healthy and properly detected. Fantastic. And I can see all 4 RAM DIMMs have been detected, and if we expand one of them, we can see the speed, size, serial number, and make and model. Perfect. Last check is the PSUs, and expanding them out, we can see we have both PSUs, and we can see their part and serial numbers, the make, and their status and features. Perfect, the hardware is all good. There are just 2 more things I want to do before we get this thing racked. The fans are loud on this host by default, so let's modify their settings. We'll head over to configuration at the top, and then to fan mode. Looks like the default is set to standard speed, which is louder than I want at idle. So we'll select Set Fan to PUE2, which will lower the fan speeds and thus the noise when there's no need for that much cooling, and we'll click Save below to make that change stick. Last thing I want to do, just for my own satisfaction, is take a look at the remote console here and reboot the host to see how it boots up and check for any errors. We'll head up to Power Control in the top right and then set Power Reset to kick off a reset of this host, and we can watch it boot in real time. Here's where we'll see if all 6 SSDs up front are detected by the storage controller. And all 6, 0 through 5 of the Intel SSDs are detected, so we're good on this controller. Overall, the build process went smoothly, and I'm thankful that everything worked as expected, save for the fan noise, but that was easily fixed via the OOB management. I'm pretty pissed about the rails, and I'm lucky I just happened to have those adjustable rack rails laying around. I've written the eBay seller, and I'm waiting to hear back, but I suspect I won't find any remedy from them since it's this late after the sale. Now the system is racked and stacked and ready to be used, let's talk about my plans for the host. I started off by talking about how absurd the server is for your home lab, and it absolutely is, and I'm not going to be using it for my home lab per se. My intention here for the server is to use it to create content around testing different virtualization platforms and doing in-depth testing and evaluation of clustering and performance. And here's where I could use your help. What would you like to see set up and tested on this host? I'm planning to evaluate Nutanix CE, Proxmox, and XCP-ng, primarily so I can fully learn them, but also so I can become intimately familiar with each platform's strengths and weaknesses, and then share that knowledge with those of you who are interested. So get down in those comments below and tell me what platforms you want to see evaluated. And if you people tell me Hyper-V, I'm probably going to test it. Who am I kidding? Anyway, get down there and let me know. And that, friends, will do it for this video. If you liked it, throw us a sub and a like. And if you have a beef with anything I've said here, let me know in the comments below. Special thank you to our YouTube members. You guys help keep the lights on, and we thank you for it. If you'd like to help support the channel, consider becoming a member or buy some of our swag. It all helps us keep making these videos. And now that you've finished watching this video, how about checking out this playlist of other home lab and self-hosting videos we've done in the past? If you're looking for your next great home lab idea, we can help.